I always feel we have to start with context because everyone requires a bit of a backstory that comes on this podcast. And I think the backstory of you and your family business is very important to elucidate. As you know, one of our first questions to you goes right to the root of I think, one of the main reasons why you see the world the way that you see it today, which is that you are of the generation in Lebanon that was actually born and raised during the Civil War. How do you think growing up under these circumstances has shaped your understanding of what encompasses your responsibility or your social responsibility?
It actually goes back. So HOLDAL is this year marking the 75th milestone, third generation. And it goes back to where it all started, so 1947. And if I go back to my grandfather, who was actually the founder of HOLDAL, I do recall very well, he's no longer among us, but he must be looking from the sky thinking, oh my God, this world is going crazier. I'm sure that basically his background, the fact that he did not have the right context, but he had a vision, he had a bold and fearless attitude, and he was very intuitive. The context was very different on his, if you want, at his stage. Then moving on to my father and then us, if I look back at my childhood and my sister and brother's childhood, we are the kids of the war. So our generation, I was born in 77 and the war started in 75. So we were actually born during the war. We know shelter, we know everything we're seeing on TV now in Ukraine, we have lived it. So for the longest I've had parents who have given all their time to the community. So my mother brought us up with all the children of AFEL, which is an NGO that looks after kids who are really living in very unprivileged ecosystem with lack of access to funds, lack of resources, drugs, alcohol, in very, very, very poor areas of Lebanon. But we grew up with these kids. We grew up in the shelter. We grew up in the summer camp with these children. For the longest I've known, inside and outside HOLDAL. During the war, my father never left Lebanon because he felt he was responsible for the 550 families back then. He never left Lebanon. So for me, it was really, and for my brother and sisters, it's part of who we are. It's part of how we were brought up. And if we look back at the past few years, it explains a lot the choices we have made. Sometimes it means going against traffic. Sometimes it means having the courage to actually face many, many obstacles because we live in a society that is not always geared towards enabling what is right, what is fair, what is justice. But it's been really part of us growing up and us evolving through the war until now. Even if it's not the war, we are extremely affected by what is happening to us. So it's really going back to the raison d'etre of this family and making sure that at the end of the day, it's not about a company that is selling products or services. There is an ultimate social, economic, and environmental promise that needs to walk the talk on the strategy, on the decision making, on everything we do at HOLDAL. So it's very, very organic in us. So there is a lot of decision that comes naturally without any due diligence, because we know that if we want to stay consistent and authentic with our raison d'etre, it's actually, we just have to go back to why we exist as a family business.
When did you first come across the formal terms basically around these things? And was it immediately for you like a checkpoint where you were like, well, we've always actually been doing this. This is actually something that is totally comes very naturally to us. Can you tell us more about like how you came across this and whether that resonated with you?
The trigger happened in 2009. I joined the family business after 10 years working for multinationals, traveling from countries to countries. And I joined the family business, and the first question I asked my father back then, who was the CEO, was, how can I help you? How can I serve the community? How can I help you integrate all the great values that we were brought up with and all this deep sense of purpose and values and social, economic, and environmental aspiration that you have in your heart but from an institutionalization point of view. How can we put some mechanism in place? How can we link them to the culture, to the values, to all the policies, to everything that HOLDAL stands for? And this was the trigger in 2009, which happened to be also the beginning of the change management journey for HOLDAL, which kicked off in 2010.
Just in terms of how that conversation went, though, with the older generation, Maissa, because I think that's what everyone is curious about, because you guys did something that's very difficult to achieve. You managed to align not just brothers and sisters, but also you managed to align with your parents. And that was tough. I know that was a really difficult thing to do. So can you tell us a little bit more about sort of the quality of exchange that happened there between the generations and how you guys came to an alignment?
So really the first few years from a change management point of view, I would say the first 2 years were very much aligning and building the ecosystem from a family point of view, where you had family members working outside the country, outside the business on, building if you want, the family council. So at the beginning, it required a bit of adjustment so that we can honor the legacy, but at the same time, we can be heard and understood. So we found, I think, middle ground after 3 or 4 years.
Tell us a little bit maybe more about what does your family do to remain, I guess, motivated in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds against you sometimes? How do you talk to each other? How do you keep each other? How do you give each other a heart to go that extra mile in spite of just normal living already kind of being challenging for you guys sometimes?
I would say, honestly, unconditional love. Yeah, I know it would seem theoretical, and we've done a lot on the milestones, the deliverables, a lot more than most of the big companies and the regional companies but honestly, it's the unconditional love. And then obviously a lot of protocols in terms of when you trust every member, you let them do their job. So you don't interfere in their day-to-day job, because the last thing they want is one more noise on their daily calendar saying, I need to justify that move or that move.
What does success look like for you today, Maissa? For you personally and as a family business, how do you today define success for yourselves?
Honestly, every night I try to go to sleep with a conscience that I can be proud of. And there is no small or medium or big effort. And it's not just about maintaining and defending a legacy or rehabilitating or rebuilding. It's also about enabling the future. I'm also projecting, what do we need to do for Gen Z and Gen Alpha? So for our children, because I think the world is literally going mad. So for me, success is really trying to make sure that at night I was able during the day to bring a difference in people's life, wherever they are.
For other family businesses out there, that desire, the desire is there, but the execution is foggy for them. So what are your tips and what are the first few steps they can take in order to start having the same sort of impact HOLDAL has on its community?
The most important thing is, do not build a department of 1 or 2 people and name yourself head of SDG or head of CSR, which you will see in a lot of companies. I've never had it and I will never have it. It's not because we are small. It's because I am deeply convinced that this is part of your culture. This is part of your ecosystem, and every purpose and values driven entrepreneur and partner is welcome on the table to bring his or her passion and expertise. And this is the only way to drive change. So once you have identified, if you want, your low-hanging fruits, then you start actually raising awareness with your internal ecosystem, whatever that is. So it's a team of 30 or 20 or 500, whatever. And then once you start raising awareness, you actually build your change aging teams. So your change management team. And your change management team, I have leads, I have champions, I have volunteers. And every year, I allow more and more people to be part of it. And they give 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% of their time voluntarily on top of their day-to-day job to roll the dice on our promises. Then once you have a very internal powerhouse and support system of game changers, enablers, lead, and change agents, you then actually look at externally around you, locally and globally, who has a certain core capability that will reinforce your solution on any of the promise you have, whether it's social or economic or environmental. And this is how you do it. And with the right governance and the right mechanism, you're able actually to work on the ownership and accountability point of view, not just individually, collectively. What do you stand for? What is your ultimate collective promise? Because you have a collective responsibility. So for me, really, I try not to shy away with the big words. And there are so many technical words that are so impressive. And you read about them and you want to run away. I try not to run away, and I try to simplify everything. And most importantly, make everything meaningful to our size, our industries, our culture. And that's it.